and in this video, I want to give you my impressions of the game as I have over 30 hours in it on PC. We'll be discussing a ton about the complexities of the game, but if this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by upfronting the knowledge of my videos. So let me just tell you that if you've never played a Nioh title, but you've played all the From Software games, this game is definitely going to be a shock to the system. The way combat works will feel familiar, but you have to use what is called a ki pulse to replenish stamina, or else you just get exhausted and stomped on. This adds a layer of complexity because you can't just spam swinging. It also gets crazier as you get further into the game, adding offensive and defensive mechanics into it. Also, the game's difficulty has a real nice curve. It's punishing while you learn the curve, gets easier as you master early mechanics, and then throws you right back into the fire when you move to the next area. I never felt like I was outpacing the game, which is a fine line to run. There's tons of gameplay diversity this time. You swap seamlessly between Samurai and Ninja stance, which also dictates the cadence of gameplay. Samurai is more the typical gameplay of Nioh, with Ninja being far more fast and agile. This can be good or bad depending on your playstyle for veterans. Chances are, if you elect a specific weapon, it fits into a playstyle that matches that stance. I know the stances are a hot button topic, and I'll talk about it more in its respective section, but you can actually ignore stances entirely if you want and just play a samurai or what have you. Now, some stuff I'm not too crazy about. The music in the game is really repetitive. It's beautiful and orchestral and over the top, but then it's the same chords repeated in locations you're going to go through multiple times because you keep getting killed. That's something that has stood out to me. Also, the UI has a lot of clunk to it, which is nothing new for these titles, let alone this genre. There's a lot of power in it though, via the options with a ton of customization, but there's so many things in the game where it doesn't explain how something works or what a specific mechanic is. I've spent so much time just staring at the menu screens, making sense of how one system works or another. This is a pain point since I always like to understand what I'm doing when I'm doing it. But in closing, I'm absolutely loving the game. The evolution of the open world is amazing, and the quality of life improvements for the open world formula are really good. The challenge of mastering the combat feels more like a fighting game since you really have to learn more complex combos. They've also done a great job of taking a ton of systems and blending them together to the point that they don't feel bloated, but feel like they all exist in their own tidy space.
30 seconds before
The presentation of the game is also a blend of 1 and 2. You get a lot of the dark tones and creepy atmosphere of 1 until you clear Crucible. Then it's brighter, more scenic tones of the second game, which comes together for a great overall feel. Well, that's it. Too long didn't watch this entire video. If that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down. I want to be respectful of your time. You can navigate ahead to any part of the video that interests you the most using the chapters of the timeline in the description. And if you are heading out and you found the video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Each one of those helps me out in a huge way. You can find a link to my Twitch below where I will be streaming Nioh for you today and all weekend. Just swing by and see what the game is all about. So let's get started here on my first impressions of Nioh. So loading into the game, let's talk first about the difficulty. So I think this is going to be the thing that makes people bounce off initially when they jump in if they've never played a Nioh title. So when you play Bloodborne, when you play Elden Ring, when you play Rise of P, when you play Lords of the Fallen, you attack and swing and dodge and parry, right? Those are kind of the mechanics of the game. And Nioh does that, but you have to remember, Nioh was made by Koei. Then it's people who made Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors, so the DNA of those games is mass brawler, hack and slash, spam buttons. You don't really do that here. So let me and if you're worried about spoilers, anything I'm showing you is from the very first region of the game in the very first like 10 minutes of the game. So I'm not going to show you anything that's beyond that. But I'm just going to swing. If you're a veteran too, you'll see some of the creatures you know. I'm going to swing. You can see right below that little blue bar, that is called your ki. And those little like pulses that handle the thing
Behold the god of thunder!
Those create this little like burst around them. Well, I can just keep swinging and keep swinging and keep swinging and chain into different buttons. And I'm going to drain all my ki, and then I've got that red flash. So if someone hits me, I can just be pretty much insta-get. And we know that that's kind of a mechanic from some of the other games. But you can replenish that at a faster rate. You can see how
Maximum pulse!
if I swing, and I time it properly, I do what's called a ki pulse. My ki pulse replenishes the missing stamina, and then replenishes what I haven't replenished even faster. So the point of the game is to kind of master your weapon cadence and your stringing cadence so that you're not completely out of key every time you do something. But you don't master these. And it sounds like it's an easy thing to master. Like, no big deal. But let me give you a concept of what I'm pressing. I'm pressing X to do my quick, Y to do my heavy, and then that right bumper is the button to do that pulse. So you have to swing, swing, pulse quickly.
Anyone willing
Again,
to help?
no big deal when you're just kind of doing it on your own. But if I add in the element of enemies, and those enemies, unless you're doing a heavy amount of damage to stagger them, they'll just kind of keep hitting you. So we're gonna see so I have to kind of keep my key pulse, or else I will run out of stamina. And this guy can really, so I'm gonna let my, okay, I got lucky there. Feeling faster than I thought I would. If I don't really stay on top of that stamina, see right now it's in a real, like, there we go. I'm in a dangerous spot right now. They can just really mess me up. So you have to really learn
Sniper.
to swing, swing, pulse. Do whatever you can with that, to use that pulse in a way that's not going to put you in a position that you just get nuked. This is the thing that was the biggest hurdle to me. I forgot that there was a thing for Neo, and it was Neo 1 and Neo 2. And it is a difficult thing to master. Once you start to play the game more,
The god of
this starts to get built into
thunder!
other mechanics. That's in my dog. Now I can just do it that way. I don't have to press the bumper. And it can be layered into other things. So once you get the
I've got your
layering
back.
portion of it, that difficulty starts to subside, and it does happen quickly. But if you don't do it, if you don't master that quickly, and it really just takes time. It just takes time of sitting down, putting some reps in, and you'll get into it. But that difficulty is really going to hit you in the face. But outside of that, what is the difficulty feel? And, you know, there are some monsters that they just always trump. You know, like I've played so many of these games, and even if I'm just talking about like a Dark Souls game or Elden Ring, there's certain monsters that just always get it. Okay, in Elden Ring, you've got those knights that appear at night. I know their attack patterns, I know how to defeat them, but for some reason I always misjudge their attacks. It's a me problem, it's a skill issue, right? But that's present here in Neo 3. I've played through so many different monster types, and the difficulty is still present. The danger is still present, as it should be. Your character gets stronger, you get better weapons, but those things still progressively continue, like those really going to do a catastrophic amount of damage if you're not off the game. And in the very beginning, I struggled because I hadn't played in a long time. So I forgot about reflex. I forgot about how to time it, and it was frustrating the shit out of me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was playing I was cussing all the why are you playing this game? I should stop being a YouTuber and blow my house down. You know, like I was not having a good time. But once I really put the paces in and took some time to learn the key pulse again, because it had been so long, it clicked, and I felt stronger, faster is what I'll say. The difficulty was in my face, a real immediate, not even just occurred. It was
God of
and once I
thunder!
got to that first plateau, I hit a curve, meaning that I felt like everything I was facing was a progressive difficulty that I really enjoyed, and it really felt challenging. And then I moved to the next area, and that difficulty spiked again. But at least this time, I had an understanding of the game's mechanics, the systems that we'll talk about a bit here, that have been introduced to me, helped me leverage advantages against those challenges, and I had just more things at my disposal. What I will say is, when we talk about this is a good subject about the systems, is that the game has tons of little things, tons of complexities. There's this, there's that, there's this, there's that, and each one of those helps you either get better or helps mitigate some of the challenge by allowing you to get bonuses or allowing you to push through those barriers. So let's now take a switch here into systems and talk about it, because there are so many, and they somehow manage to do a real good job putting them together. So here we are in the hub of the game. I won't tell any more about this. I might do this as well. So I'm gonna go here and Prey is a big portion of this game. It's like bonfires, if you want to think of it from a Dark Souls perspective. But this is where you do a lot of things in this game, and this is true of all three of the titles. Leveling up being, of course, one of them. But let's just go through some of the systems here, because in just this screen alone, we're going to be able to go through things like that. So we have a Guardian Spear. Guardian Spirit is this spirit that you empower throughout the game, and as it reaches 100, you can then use the Guardian Spirit. It'll transform you. You'll basically turn into like something awesome from an anime, and you'll go to town and stuff. And your Guardian Spirit will dictate what you look like. It'll dictate the element maybe that you take advantage of. It's called ancient. There's a term for what it means. Like, you can hold down this menu explanation. It'll tell you every little thing, every little system. Nested screen to get to the but. And you can see all this information if you've never seen the Neo title. That will explain another portion too. But these individual Guardian Spirits then give you additional special effects when you just have them equipped. And now you also get the ability to use a skill at the very bottom here. You can see Guardian Spirit skill. This is a special skill that you can use without transforming all the way into the ability. So you get this just kind of a cool little ability. And they're different depending on if you are a samurai or a ninja. So you can see that there's just two different ones that you can take advantage of and use those instead. So that's just the Guardian Spirit system. Oops. There's also the Soul Cores. You have this Onryo box, and I can't pronounce that, I'm so sorry. And you find these Soul Cores of all the creatures that you kill, and you can use either their Yang or their Yin position. The Yin position is going to give you some sort of beneficial talisman or something of the sort. Yang position allows you to summon that creature into the game. So these now also give you benefits to your attack, your defense, whatever water damage, auto grave recovery, all it is, whatever's in there, that's in the system. You also have battles. This is a light system, but Battle Stroll, so I can go replay stuff. You have the co-op in the game where you can do a bunch of things there.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Code Vein 2, a Souls-like that is set to release in full tomorrow, however is currently in its early access for pre-orders period. But that's not actually how I'm bringing you this. Bandai Namco reached out and asked if I would like to take a look at the game, and obviously I agreed to that, and that's why we're here now. But the other reason being that a lot of people had been asking me about Code Vein 2 because I do play a fair few Souls-likes. However, while I wanted to help give people an idea of what's going on with this game, the reason I've made no attempt to review this, or plans anyways, is because I have not played the first game at all, and I would prefer to have that context before jumping into this one fully, especially since, if you look at the early Steam reviews for this, there are basically two main complaints. People who don't care for how this game evolved from the first game, and also some people having problems with performance. Now, I didn't really have any performance issues personally, but I saw enough complaints about it that people should probably take note of exactly that. But with that stuff out of the way, let's dive into the rest of this. So, Code Vein 2 puts us in a world where, as with any Souls-like, we'll be fighting our way through it. However, the catch here being time travel. Basically, there's this thing called the Luna Rapaces, I believe it is, and this is turning revenants or vampires, from my understanding, into mindless monsters that have to be hunted down. The other issue here is that the event, the Luna Rapaces, is apparently going to cause the inevitable destruction of the world unless you can start doing some time traveling in order to put a stop to that, which is where our friend Lou here comes in, as she can facilitate said time travel and allow us to do the exploration that we need to do to, of course, effectuate the story. But before we do that, you first have to make a character. Now, I will say the character creation specifically of this game is actually pretty interesting, if only for the way it approaches things like layered clothing, alongside a whole host of customizable stuff. I like the way that they actually did a pretty, I would say, robust character creator, even if the visual art style isn't obviously going to be for everybody. However, as this game is loosely based around the idea of vampires, since the name Code Vein, It is important that everybody addresses my new dog character at his appropriate name, Night Pain. Once you're done with all that, however, we can get into the bulk of the rest of the game, as you will be awoken from some sort of slumber by Lou, who's going to help you get to work here. Now, the curious thing is that at least portions of this game seem fairly free roam in terms of exploration and how you approach them. Basically a large open area with some dungeons scattered here in between. You won't, however, be alone, though, because one of the first big mechanics I want to talk about is the partner system. So we first meet up with a guy named Noah in the past who becomes your first major partner in the scene. The gist of it seems to be this game's take on the typical summoning system that people use to get by tough boss fights. Essentially, you'll have a partner sort of equipped to your character, if you will, and that partner will be able to either provide large buffs as well as a special trait, or you could have them fight alongside you with that trait as opposed to the larger buffs. Now, either way, they're going to lend a portion of their health to yours, called their immortality points, and as long as those are still active on you, you get bonuses and stuff from that character. However, once you get into your own HP, that goes away until you heal up. Regular healing items will restore this, but that's the gist of it. So you're alternate between these characters helping you physically, or just providing like stat boosts and the like. I think that's an interesting way to bridge the typical gap that summoning comes with, which they take even one step farther, because if you die while your summon is up, it will actually restore you to life. Then go on a short cooldown, and then if you can live long enough for your summon to reappear physically, it will just revive you again. And in that way, there is a little bit of leeway in terms of when death actually comes for you. So that's a pretty interesting system in and of itself, and while I am curious to see how stuff like that works, much of the rest of the game is very standard Souls-like stuff, you know, checkpoints, run around, rest at those, gain experience from killing things that acts as your currency that they use to level up and the like. I will say leveling up does not see you picking stats, you rather just kind of get the baseline, with stats being affected by things like your various types of forma. Now you have some default forma, which are your equipables more or less. There's a defensive one, an offensive one, things like that. However, you can also attach weapon forma to your chosen weapon type, which will then give you like special moves you can perform with that weapon. On top of that, you also get blood codes, seemingly with the people that you are bonded with in large part, as maxing proficiency with a blood code, which seems to just be like a general equipable tailored to a certain playstyle. You will then be able to take that and speak to the person you got it from, and then that upgrades the thing. But then on top of stuff like that, there's also boosters and the like that you'll be able to equip and customize. Changing out your various forma tends to affect your stats, and also more tactical things like how your blocking is attached to your defensive forma. So they start you off with a basic like sort of shield one, but then you can grab one that is actually more suited for parries or just different types of blocking and damage mitigation in addition to just straight up dodging. Now I will say the defensive side of things in particular does seem a little clunky to me in this game compared to other Souls-likes, in the sense that because you have to sort of pick and choose exactly what type of damage mitigation you would like in that way, it can be a little bit tricky because, for instance, the parry one sometimes depending on your ichor, or the thing that actually powers your typical like weapon abilities and the like, if you don't have it, the parry one will actually see you take health damage anyway, which makes it a little difficult to use that as a defensive tool intention, because the second you're out of ichor, you start taking a ton of damage anyway. So I only played for a couple hours, maybe there's more that feel a little better, but on the defensive side of things in particular, I was having trouble finding something that actually felt good to use, as opposed to just dodging. And then the problem with dodging is I noticed that some of the timing on things like bosses could be a little rough, in that dodging one attack actually puts you into like guaranteed getting hit by the follow-up, simply because of like the pacing of the dodge itself, which would probably be my main gripe about the game as a whole at the moment, at least towards the beginning here. But there's still a few more things to talk about. There's also the drain mechanic. So as with a lot of these games,
Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, Baldur's Gate 3 is an absolute masterpiece of a game. It's one of the greatest to ever do it, really. It's been around 2.5 years now since we were graced with its existence, fully releasing to the world, and in that time it has a lot of changes and updates. And even with those updates finishing off earlier this year, there are still massive amounts of people playing the game. Even as recently as the end of December, there were 130,000 concurrent players on Steam alone, which is only one place that people can play this game. And that's pretty wild for a game this far past its release that isn't based around like an endless multiplayer game loop, like a Monster Hunter game or an FPS that just wants you to play round after round endlessly. Baldur's Gate 3 is a story experience first and foremost, and a wildly cool technical and mechanical combat system inside of that. But it's not made in a way to try and lure you into playing it for years on end, and the fact that people are, that just shows how good the game is, how deep the game is, and how varied your playthroughs can be from start to finish. That said, now that we have entered 2026, I wanted to essentially just remind you all that Baldur's Gate 3 is still there, talking about any extra reasons that you might have to play it right now that you might not think of or be aware of, and then just a quick discussion on the most recent information possible about potential DLCs or sequels for the game moving forward too. First up then, if you have the itch to play the game, play it. Whether you are someone who never actually gave it a try, or if you played it on launch and finished it and then never went back, or even if you're someone who played it even up until the big update back in April of 2025, there is still always more to experience in this game, and the variety is really a big selling point, honestly. On the surface, you could do a Dark Urge playthrough if you haven't done so yet, for a totally different character-driven experience through the story that you already know, and one that is a lot more heartbreaking than what you're used to as well, probably. You can do an honor mode run if you haven't tried honor mode before to really add an extra layer of challenge and make it a much more rewarding experience on the combat side of the game. But then even beyond that, unless you've done a bunch of playthroughs, you probably still have companion storylines that you have not seen, side quests or quest chains that you may have missed on initial run through the game, endings that you might not have noticed. Like, you haven't truly lived until you turned Gale into a living bomb and had the game end in Act 2 instead of playing through Act 3. And the thing is, even if you're saying that you've done all of that stuff, you probably have not experienced everything that was added in the updates that happened after the release of the game. They added things like more detail to certain endings, like one of Karlach's endings, but also they added a full epilogue section at the end of the game, as well as a bunch of new potential ending cutscenes depending on your actions and choices, especially expanding on the sort of evil ending options. They added honor mode itself, which is the highest difficulty mode available. They added the ability to change a ton of things about your character's aesthetics during your playthrough whenever you want to, really, through the use of a magic mirror, and they put in a bunch of more personalized kissing animations for each character and for size differences and such too. So if romance was the reason that you loved this game, there's even more to love. Then we had the final patch, the big update back in April of 2025. This patch added things like crossplay between platforms. You can play co-op with your friends regardless of how they play the game and how they own it, and that in itself is a whole new way to play if you haven't done it before. If you have only played solo in Baldur's Gate 3, I highly recommend trying out in a co-op playthrough with friends, as it is a completely different, much more chaotic experience, and honestly, even better if you can find a friend who hasn't played the game yet themselves. They added a photo mode to the game, so you can really take in the beauty of this game and share it with others, but then they also added in a new subclass for every class in the game, with some real standouts being Death Domain Cleric, Circle of Stars Druid, Way of the Drunken Master Monk, Hexblade Warlock, and Blade Singing Wizard. All of these are, of course, based on existing D&D subclasses from people who enjoy the systems that this game is built upon, and they, of course, have their own fun Larian flair added to them, too. And multi-classing with these subclasses adds a massive layer of extra fresh depth. If you have not played the new subclasses, these new ones can in themselves be a reason to do a fresh playthrough. And even if you have played some of them, there are, again, 12 new subclasses, so you probably won't have experienced all of them properly unless you do multiple playthroughs. And then the question is simply, is that something that you consider worth it to do for your own enjoyment? And if you're wondering if these updates run the same quality standard as today's games, what you have to do is look at reviews. Even the recent reviews on Steam, which means it doesn't have the massive amount of positivity from the game's initial release, these recent reviews are still 93% positive, which is massively high for a game on Steam these days, especially for the recent reviews section of a game that is 2.5 years old. Beyond that, there are, of course, mods.
Be honest. What do you think of the new look?
Oh no, he's hot! The modding scene for Baldur's Gate 3 is pretty incredible. There are things on the level of full-on extra subclasses for mods, unique legendary equipment of various kinds that can totally change the way that game plays through your playthrough. And to point out some mods that were highlighted by Larian themselves, because I think that's quite interesting, is it was talked about by the creators of the game. You can insert a bunch of giant bunnies into the game just as a fun present for yourself to find as you explore. You can give withers boobs. Yeah, no, I didn't misspeak there. You can give your undead friends some bountiful bazongas, and this is something the actual developers of the game showed off. And that in itself is a big part of why I love Larian. They're just here to have fun and create fun for other people. They are willing to laugh at the silly things people do with their creation, rather than some companies which would scold this. Instead of doing that, they encourage it, and it builds a better and stronger community around the game overall as a result. This makes more modders feel comfortable doing crazier things, and that results in more content existing for the players who do engage with mods. It's a win-win for everyone, really, and I do mean everyone, because unlike a lot of games, Larian actually has provided enough mod support for this game that you can install mods on console very easily if you want to. It's not an exclusively PC thing for Baldur's Gate 3. Also, just to mention, there is a mod that changes Druid wild shape form to make you turn into a car. Yes, a car. God, I love mods. So that's the bulk of the happier stuff that I wanted to talk about today, really. The game is an absolute masterpiece. It has been since it first released. If you've never played it, you should absolutely give it a chance. If you've never finished it, now is a better time than ever because they expanded upon the endings of the game with new end cutscenes and the epilogue that I mentioned earlier too. If you did play it and you did finish it, but then you stopped after that point, there's tons of new stuff and quality of life that they've added from these post-release updates. And that's not even counting the fact that, again, honor mode is now a thing for an incredibly difficult new experience, and again, 12 whole new subclasses to play around with too. Again, it's not like I'm trying to force you to play the game again if you don't want to. I'm just saying, if you have Siege, if you are considering it, maybe one of these things is enough to make it truly worth exploring again if you were on the fence. Alternatively, maybe you were someone who wanted to wait for eventual DLC of some sort. Well, that's where the last part of this discussion comes in. There are no expectations of DLC for Baldur's Gate 3 at this point. What we have is what we have, and we don't expect any further changes past what the game is, especially with the April 2025 update being labeled so heavily as final update and the recent announcement of a new game in Larian. As for specifically DLC though, and even the potential of a Baldur's Gate 4, well, this was mostly shot down over a year ago with a PC Gamer interview that was done. The sort of TLDR of the article here is that there was tons of talk of DLC, but eventually that talk was scrapped, and it even had started work on a sequel on a Baldur's Gate 4, but that too was eventually put aside. There were rumblings that this was due to some sort of falling out with Wizards of the Coast, creative differences and stuff like that, but the official response from Larian, from the developers, was simply this: their hearts were not in it to make more. Baldur's Gate 3 was an incredible creation, but firstly, they want to make something that is a bit more their own, instead of just continuing to interpret Dungeons & Dragons, just from a creativity standpoint, but most importantly, translating D&D combat into a CRPG game is very restrictive. It is not built for video games, and they had to adapt it as best as they could. There are a lot of pre-existing rules, spells, mechanics, and systems that you have to implement, and part of the difficulty with this can be seen by the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 has a maximum level of 12. The specific wording that they've said is that they were given tons of creative freedom when making the game, but specifically the D&D 5th edition combat system just wasn't made for video games, and so adapting it is what caused those restrictions. That said, you may hear these words and take them as they're not making Baldur's Gate 4 right now, but the official word is that Wizards of the Coast are searching for a new development team, and Larian simply has other priorities. They want to make something where they have even more control over it. And so showing this comment directly from Sven, the CEO of Larian, he's replying about game size and the concept of the game they were originally making before they ended up choosing to make Divinity, but he uses the phrase, "that ship has sailed," about a new D&D related game, meaning it's gone, it won't happen. Of course, who knows, it's possible at some point down the line, Larian might consider making a new Baldur's Gate game or a Baldur's Gate adjacent game if Wizards of the Coast gave them back the helm, but as it stands, we know that Wizards are already looking for a new developer for Baldur's Gate 4. That to say, there definitely will be a Baldur's Gate 4 at some point, but with it not having the same studio behind it, there's a big question of if it would even be able to match up to what Baldur's Gate 3 has accomplished. That to say, enjoy Baldur's Gate 3 for what it is. Indulge in the modding community to explore even more content than the game itself was given officially, and enjoy the ride as much as you can. That pretty much does it for today then, everyone. I just wanted to sit down in 2026 and talk a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3 for the masterpiece of a game that it is. Discuss whether it may or may not be worth going back to for you personally and trying out a fresh playthrough.
Hey folks, this is Tom Nash. Welcome back to another video. Don't click nothing, don't smash nothing, don't buy nothing, just listen. Now, this is a game-changing moment for Tesla. This is a huge earnings call, probably the most important earnings call in Tesla's history. But as I expected, most investors are not gonna see what's going on until it's plain and obvious. By that point, it's gonna be way too late. The real money is made in misunderstanding companies like Tesla. And boy, oh boy, was Tesla misunderstood from day one. Since Tesla went public, it actually dropped 30% or more 11 times. That's a lot. In that time frame, if you just held Tesla from IPO day to present time, you're up 33,500% on your investment. So this ain't my first rodeo with Tesla. Tesla is 20% of my portfolio. And even though I had an amazing run with Palantir over the past few years, I believe, as I said in my previous video, Tesla is the next Palantir moment just waiting to happen. And this earnings call proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I'm going to show you why in this video. So whether you are an existing Tesla shareholder or you're considering buying more Tesla stock, maybe starting a position, this video is for you. Please listen carefully. Now, on this earnings call, the least important part, in my opinion, was the fact that Tesla beat top and bottom earnings. That's cool that they beat revenue and that they beat earnings per share, but this is probably the least important section that I want to focus on today because it doesn't matter. It does not matter. With Tesla, it's about the future. And everybody in the comment going, it's the future, bro. Go right ahead. Do it as much as you want. I don't care. Now, think about it. Beating top and bottom is cool. Revenue, although, remains stagnant. In fact, it dropped 1.2%. Nothing to write home about. If you just analyze the earnings call from a very objective place and you just look at the numbers, there's nothing unique there. In fact, you would have said, well, it's a pretty kind of lukewarm at best earnings call. Nothing special. But then you listen to what Elon is saying, and then you examine Tesla the way I explained in my previous video, and all of a sudden, your head is going to pop open because this is going to blow your mind. So on this call, Elon actually said something very, very important. He said that they're going to discontinue Model S and Model X in 2026, and the Fremont facility is going to be converted to manufacturing Optimus full-time, okay? This is meaningful Optimus production starting in 2026, and everybody said this is years away. And Elon also said that this will be bigger than vehicles, which is kind of a duh. No, of course. That's not even the point. Of course it's going to be bigger than vehicles, but in my opinion, it's going to be way bigger than anybody understands. Now, with 1.1 million FSD subscribers as it stands today, basically Elon is saying, hey, we got a robotaxi launch coming up. We're not waiting for the regulators. We're going to launch in select cities. The Cybercab production is going to start within 2026. And then he basically explained how the entire FSD robotaxi is more of an ecosystem, network effects, not so much the way you sell a car. It's a completely different way to think about business, because here we're talking about recurring revenues, subscriptions, ecosystems. It's not the same as Tesla selling a Model S or Model X, okay? Now, Elon also announced a $20 billion capex in 2026, and he said it's gonna go for AI, compute, training, infrastructure, and all this stuff. And I'll talk about it in a second, but to me, this is the most important thing, because when somebody says AI a lot in the earnings call, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't care what people say, I care what people do. And in my world, where you put your money is what you want to do. And if you're going to commit $20 billion in a year, it means that you're pretty serious about it. Now, he also talked about energy storage demand being literally unlimited. He basically said, look, as many of them mega packs we can manufacture, there's demand. There's a year's worth of backlog for this thing. The only constraint is our ability to produce more. As I said in my previous video, Tesla energy is going to be massive. The only thing stopping it is Tesla just can't make enough of them. Now, he also said something that I think really kind of resonated with me back in 2022 when Palantir was doing the same thing. In 2022, Palantir was saying, look guys, we don't care about looking cool and looking good in any particular quarter. That's nice, but it's not about that for us. We can really work on our margins a little bit and have a little bit more Wall Street approach for these earnings. But for us, it's not about looking good in this quarter. It's about driving our long-term goal, which is to dominate the entire sector, dominate the entire market. And Elon basically said, look, this is what we're doing. So if it makes us look bad in a particular quarter, so be it. That justifies, those are the means towards the bigger end, which is dominate the market for the next 10 years. Now, my take is very, very simple. Number one, I think this was pretty much the first, hands down, 0% automotive earnings call that I've seen with Tesla. I've seen a lot of them, but this is the first time when Elon just literally embraced, hey, we don't even care about the auto stuff. It's not even about that. And I love that because I think it's the right way to go because this is Tesla's future. Now, he basically gave us zero talk or emphasis on near-term auto performance, which I think is going to anger a lot of people. It's going to trigger a lot of people who are very nearsighted, but that's fine, right? Some is going to hate it. And you know what? Tesla stock isn't for everyone, and that's fine. I have no issues with that. Now, what I think this earnings call really represents is two things. Number one is capital allocation, and number two is the direction. So capital allocation is basically where Tesla wants to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and the direction is basically, well, this is what we're going to do to get from point A to where we want to be to that capital allocation. It's basically like, you know, if you talk to a guy and he says, look, I wish I had white teeth, but they smoke cigarettes and they drink coffee and they don't go to a dental hygienist, whatever the case may be, right? So it's nice to want nice teeth, but what are you doing about it? What are the actions you're taking to get white teeth? Same thing for losing weight, same for everything. So in this call, I love that Elon said, hey, we want to be in that place, and this is what we're going to do to be there within the next 5-10 years. Now, if you listen to Elon on this call, he really kind of explains to you why the automotive sector doesn't really matter for anything beyond funding the next warp jump of Tesla. Right? Basically, the automotive sector is right now being used as a cash cow to finance the next S-curve for Tesla, which is going to be robotics, energy, and robotaxi. Now, the thing that most people still kind of misunderstand, that Elon is talking about this temporarily. He's not trying to kill the automotive business, and he's not saying that the automotive business is dying. Right now, Tesla is fighting price versus price against the Chinese companies. That's a very, very hard sell, right? But once FSD launches, and Tesla has real FSD, real self-driving cars for everyone, the car isn't going to be an issue anymore because people will be buying FSD, and Tesla, the vehicle, the hardware, is going to be the printer with Tesla selling the ink. And the Chinese will never be able to compete with that, nor any other manufacturer, because they won't have real self-driving cars on the road just like Tesla. So FSD, once released into the wild, is going to bring back demand, and I think by 2030, Tesla is going to sell double than the amount of vehicles it sold in 2025. There's a lot of CEOs, that a lot of experts who talk on these earnings call, and they promise you all this stuff, amazing things. They make sure to talk about AI, etc., and it sells really well. It's a good marketing tool, right? But at the end of the day, there's very few companies who are willing to commit massive capital towards AI. Massive. Obviously, the hyperscalers are doing it, and in that group we'll put Oracle, who's committing massive resources. But the only other company that's not a hyperscaler that's actively doing this right now is Tesla. Tesla essentially yesterday said, hey, we're going to commit $20 billion just in 2026, half our money, to make this dream come true. Now, with Fremont basically going into Optimus Land, essentially becoming a real production site, we're no longer talking, and this is what I want people to understand, about some experimental robot that's kind of built slowly and presented at events. We're talking about real production. Fremont is going to be producing real robots. It's not about prototypes anymore. It's about real robotics, not some marketing BS. And this is what I think Elon is going for. He's actually going to try and do it. Now, whether he's successful or not, now I think he will be, but whether he's successful or not, this is real. This isn't some marketing BS. He's actually going for this. Now, the thing is, right, is doing this with $0 of investing in marketing his automotive sector. Think about it. With automotive companies, if you have a demand decline, you're going to try to combat that, right? You're going to try to increase demand. You're going to try to invest in marketing and advertising. You're going to try to take all sorts of routes to basically increase how much money is coming in because you are a car company. Now, if Elon Musk is saying, I don't care about the declining demand in the short term, it just shows you how much of a not a car company Tesla is. It doesn't matter. because at the end of the day, Tesla still somehow by some investor is viewed as a car company, which is absolutely redonkulous. Now, short-term investors have never understood Tesla. I do not expect that to change after this earnings call. But I urge you to look at one thing. If debt at a company balance sheet is pretty much prison,